Well, if you are new to us in the last couple weeks, we have been studying the Gospel of St. Matthew for actually some time now. And we are coming to some really exciting points of the whole witness of who Jesus is and what Jesus has accomplished. So at this point in Matthew, we're in Matthew chapter 5. Jesus has gone public with his message and with his teaching. And he's recruited his first disciples, where he has then showcased his power through committing many miracles to those who most needed them. And so because of that, large crowds are starting to gather around Jesus, and he takes them up to a hill or a mountain, a very small mountain. And this whole section of Jesus' teaching is referred to as that, the Sermon on the Mount. And so here we get Jesus showcasing his authority as a teacher or as a rabbi, and beginning with the Beatitudes, which is what we're looking at today. He gives for us a manifesto of his way. And a beatitude is this: it's a way of receiving supreme blessedness and happiness. So Jesus begins his whole teaching ministry by going, this is the way to true fulfillment. A fulfillment that brings about a true and genuine blessedness, happiness, like a state of happiness. And what we see in this, this is a great place for somebody who's new to Jesus to really get a good summary of what it means to be a follower of Jesus and what his way looks like. And for those that have been a follower of Jesus, maybe for a long time, this is a really good reminder of what is at our absolute center and of what we aspire to live in the way of Jesus. And so the catch here is this, especially with the Beatitudes. I found this so striking, is that the way that Jesus puts forward for us of coming into blessedness, supreme blessedness, is that it is really good. Like, it meets needs I don't think we realize we have. It's like real, true, deep fulfillment. So it's really, really good. Like, this is the good way for individuals and for societies as a whole. And it gives a vision for what true happiness might look like. But the catch is that it's too good. The Beatitudes are too good. They're unattainably so. And so each one of the Beatitudes kind of proves that this isn't like a 12-step process that anybody can just go, okay, if I do these, 8 or 12 or 9 things, then I will achieve for myself supreme happiness. This is not, if that's what you're looking for, the way of Jesus is not for you. Instead, what it is they're steps, they're progressive, but they are things that happen to us. They're so good that an outside force has to achieve them for us, because we can't accomplish this stuff. We can't achieve it in and of ourselves. And today's Beatitude that we're looking at proves that even more so than any others. And today's Beatitude is this: blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Now, if this was a 9-step process, then you come to this point, we would say, okay, what you need to do next for yourself is completely achieve a pure heart. Now, you're going to have your individual reactions to what that might mean, but I think what it points to right away for us is, so I have to be completely completely pure in the deepest parts of me throughout. Am I pure? Are you pure? Has anyone achieved a purity of heart? Is that even possible? And I think the reality is that we come to very quickly is the recognition. No, I am not, nor do I know anyone who is, nor have I ever heard of anyone who achieved that. That just seems impossible. So what we have to see in order to rightly understand the Beatitudes of Jesus is actually these are the steps or the stages of a process of being impacted by the person and work of Jesus himself. So we are blessed, we are supremely happy when we receive this from Jesus. When Jesus does this to us, that's how we achieve supreme blessedness. It's actually 12 steps of receiving. And each of them builds upon the one before it. So it's a cumulative. And last time, before Easter Sunday, we looked at blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. And I found as I studied this next beatitude, it pushed me back into leaning upon all of the beatitudes that came before it. Because right away when I read, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God, I felt incredibly unqualified. I've struggled with that in all the days leading up to right now, the minutes. Going, how do I talk about this? I am not qualified. I'm not anywhere near pure of heart in terms of looking at my own abilities and actions and inner life. I'm nowhere near this. I should not be preaching on this. But what it did is it pushed me back into the other Beatitudes to realize how this could become possible. Because right away, what did it make me feel? Poor in spirit. It made me feel like I was innerly bankrupt. It made me mourn. It made me grieve the fact that I have way too many failures and inconsistencies in my life to ever hope to be pure. It made me very humbled, meek, to go, even at my best, even when I'm working my hardest, even when it feels like all things are lining up and coming together and I'm doing my best, I'm nowhere near purity of heart. And it made me see how hungry, thirsty I am for this level of goodness inside of me. I want it badly. I want this to be true about me. I want this to be true about my lived reality. I'm starving for purity and goodness. And so then it made me have to be merciful even with myself. That's actually a really hard thing to do. It's easier to have mercy on other people sometimes than it is to have mercy with your own failures and shortcomings. But to recognize, no, I need mercy. Mercy's the only way. It's not about punishing my way into purity. It's not about beating my way through anger. It doesn't work. It doesn't result in it. Self-hatred produces more desperation. But instead, mercy creates something miraculous. And it's particularly God's mercy towards me. So all of my bankruptcy of my inner life, my poor in spirit, all the mourning and the grief and the sorrow about my sin and my shortcomings, when I see the impact it's had on other people, the inability to achieve purity through my own strength, and the desperation to find this hunger and thirst for goodness. All of this then leads to his mercy, where God in his love and mercy dies for me and for my sin. This is the center of the way of Jesus. It's the cross of Jesus, which we just celebrated at Easter. And so Christ's death, perfect goodness, taking upon himself sin, shame, guilt, and the horrors of the brokenness of this world, and pouring out. And we watched a couple films over Easter of the crucifixion of Jesus, and we've been watching some other film representations of Jesus's life and teaching. And when he's in the midst of his crucifixion and he says, "Father, forgive them," for they know not what they do. Calling out to God in the midst of pure injustice and hatred, and he calls out to God and says, they don't know what they're doing. Forgive them, Father. This is the pinnacle of mercy. When Jesus is being sinned against by humanity, and yet he pours out over them grace and forgiveness. It's unbelievable. It makes no sense to what we know to be typical. And this is the way of Jesus, to pour mercy over sin, love and forgiveness over sin. And then comes this next beatitude. Blessed are they further. Think of all of the blessing that's come in this. Rather than poverty of spirit, we've received the kingdom of heaven, all of God's goodness and resources available. For those who are mourning, he brings comfort. To those who are meek, he gives a grand inheritance of the whole earth, to say, all of this I will provide for you and give to you, not because of your strength, but because of mine. And to the hungry and the thirsty, he gives satisfaction. The goodness you hunger for, I will give you. The mercy that you need, you will receive from me. And now blessed are you even more, even fuller than this. I'm not even done blessing you. Next, I will give you purity of heart. So the going from poverty of spirit to purity of heart, this is the progressive work of Jesus in the life of those who would receive him. Isn't that wild? So what then is purity of heart? What does it mean to be pure in heart? Well, it means all of that sin, all of that sorrow. Where do we accumulate that? Where do we commit sin from? Well, we sin from the heart first. Where does sorrow happen? Well, sorrow collects in the heart. Where does shame reside? It resides in the heart. So it's in this place that God wants to continue the work that he's been doing in blessing us with forgiveness, with inheritance, with righteousness, with goodness, with comfort, with strength, all these things that he's giving to the person. He is now it culminates in this place of, it will result in a purity of heart. That means a change of our innermost being. Now, when the Bible talks about the heart, it's this idea of the deepest seat of the self. So your deepest, corest you. And so everything else that you are flows from that place, from the heart. So the realest, most honest you is in the heart. Now, it's not actually the physical heart. It's just an ancient language used to describe it. It's why we still today say, I love you from the bottom of my heart. We're communicating the very existence of me, the deepest part of me. So from that place, though, comes your true self, but your true motivations, the way what you believe is there, your soul responds, your emotions come out from the place of your heart, and your thoughts think accordingly, and then you act upon what's in your heart. And so Jesus actually says, from the mouth, the heart speaks, right? So that kind of idea, this idea of that you're welling up from the inside and then expressing that outwardly. And so the heart, if the heart is one way, then the whole person is that way, right? The idea, if I love you from the bottom of my heart, means I love you from the deepest part, then increasingly outwardly. So I love you in my feelings and my emotions. I love you in my thoughts. I love you in my actions. So it's the whole you. So what does it mean for that part of us, or the heart, to be pure? Now, this language of purity, I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is gold, right? Whether or not gold is pure has to do with it, whether it's untainted in its goodness, in its true nature, or whether or not other foreign things are mixed into it. So what would those kind of foreign things be mixed into the heart of humanity? Well, it's evil. It's darkness. And so what we're talking about is somebody whose heart, whose motivations and feelings and thoughts and actions are pure goodness. You see why the way of Jesus is not about what we accomplish? Who has that level of control? Who has that level of goodness? I just don't know that I do. And so, in order for a heart to be pure, though, it has to be whole. There can't be a divided heart. A divided heart means, being of, we hear of things like being of two minds, or divided hearts express themselves as being two-faced. And then you can feel that in someone when it's like they're interacting with you, but it doesn't feel like their truest self. And you can see the mask. You can see where it looks human, but it's not all there. It's not all there. It's not whole. You could tell it's a facade or a fake. There's a true reality deeper inside, and the one that you're getting is kind of put on. It's being acted out before you. So a pure heart has to be whole, meaning there needs to be continuity. What's deep down is being expressed truthfully throughout the whole into the body. And so where that means the, even darker, broken or sorrowful or sinful parts of that person, a pure heart means that all those places have been reintegrated. They're not all divided up into parts and you don't know which person you're going to get, but you're getting this reintegrated whole. That the fearful parts of them have been wooed back into, have been brought into safety and feel understood, cared for, and reintegrated. The sinful parts that are ashamed or guilty have received mercy and love and have been brought back into wholeness, meaning there's not just the sinful parts over there and this is the good me and I hate that part of me. Those parts are actually known, understood, forgiven, healed, and brought back into oneness. Desires, right? So that we don't have rogue desires. Jesus, from within the person, is understanding the desire and offering to fulfill the desire in a right way. Dreams, similarly. And this is what's so unique about Jesus, is that recognizing our inner bankruptcy, our grief and sorrow about that, our inability to change it, our desire for goodness, but our inability to achieve it, and our need for mercy. Jesus then brings who we are back into wholeness. It's a recreation of who we were. Sin breaks us and destroys us from the inside. And so we're a shell of a person. We're broken down and things are intermingled and mixed in there. But Jesus has the ability to bring it all into wholeness. So my sinful parts, Jesus reintegrates that part of me, saves that part of me from a sinful way of living and brings me into satisfaction in him. My desires that I don't know how to fulfill rightly, Jesus trains those desires into a way of finding true fulfillment. Now, where a whole heart leads to, I think the next step in purity is an unselfishness. And we'll see this come up more in the Gospel of Matthew when we start looking more at the teachings of Jesus. How Jesus summarizes what a good way of living is number one, to love God, and number two, to love your neighbor as yourself. That's how Jesus summarizes a life of goodness. So in doing that, what he's saying is that a pure heart is going to find true satisfaction and fulfillment in the love of God. Loves God's perfect love and goodness towards his creation. And so a pure heart is going to live within that reality. And so a pure heart does not need anything, need or want anything for itself, because it knows it already has everything it needs and knows that everything it wants is truly found in God's love and goodness. And so a pure heart knows true fulfillment. Now, why that matters is the second thing. A pure heart genuinely wants to give everything for the good of others. And I think this is what we would all recognize as true, is somebody who's pure is fulfilled. And somebody who's pure wants to see other people fulfilled, wants to love their friends, family, neighbors as they would themselves. They want them to find true fulfillment. So they live unselfishly. The reason I think this is so profound is because we know an impure heart has other motives. It's trying to get something from me for themselves. And we can sense that heart. And we know that that heart is not a good heart. We also recognize that we have that in us. I get like that. I recognize where I feel like my needs aren't getting met and I want other people to meet that. So I'll manipulate that. I will force that. I will try and make that happen. You can tell when even when I drift into that, that's not true. That's not a whole heart, is it? It's not pure. So a pure heart is one that finds fulfillment in God and lives to serve other people's fulfillment. That's true purity. Now, the result of this beatitude, Jesus says, is they shall see God. And at first it sounds like a reward. Like if you're truly pure, you deserve to see God. And there's stuff in the Bible that points to that as truth, actually, that God can't participate, doesn't want evil in his presence. And so purity begets his presence. But I think there's something more going on here. Though it's easy to read that in as the simplest explanation. I think a pure heart sees God because a pure heart can only come from seeing God in Jesus. I'm convinced of that. A pure heart's not possible without seeing God. Because when we see God, we see perfect love, which satisfies our heart in a deep, fulfilling way. Seeing God is to see mercy and to be saved. All the parts of me that need to be made whole and healed and reintegrated are achieved by God's mercy. Seeing God is seeing salvation. And so in John chapter 14, Philip, one of the disciples of Jesus, says to him, Jesus, Lord, show us the Father, and it is enough for us. So Philip's desire is, show me God. And Jesus' response is this: have I been with you so long, and you still do not know me, Philip? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Do you not believe that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me? Jesus' point is, he is God. Jesus is the clearest vision of God that you can see. All the Old Testament is about people who could only hope to see God. Moses was the one that saw the most, and all he saw was the back of God. So nobody can see God because God is spirit, but then God becomes incarnate at the birth of Jesus. God in flesh. I should say at the conception of Jesus. And so Jesus becomes now the primary means by which we can see God. And when we see Jesus, we see God. And so when we see Jesus, we see God's perfect love expressed for us. When we see Jesus, we see God's mercy on display for us. When we see Jesus, we see our salvation. Our hearts are made pure in seeing who God is in the person and work of Jesus. So blessed are the pure in heart because they have seen God. Otherwise, how would their hearts be purified in the first place? Jesus deals with what has made our hearts impure upon his cross. Jesus then fills us with purity through his resurrection. He makes us like him in his goodness. He makes us able to serve and love our neighbors as ourselves because we have been forgiven and have found satisfaction in the love of God. Jesus purifies, and in doing so, Jesus reveals who God is. My friends, I don't know if I've ever been so humbled by a text of Scripture. I cannot do this passage justice because I am the worst of sinners, and it's not an exaggeration. But what I hope you would see most clearly today is the beauty and goodness and purity of Jesus. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Your impurity of heart is what sets you up to see the goodness of Jesus as he makes your heart pure, taking you from a bankrupt spiritual state. In your grieving and in your meekness and inability, and he brings you by his mercy into fulfillment of that hunger and thirst within you, to have purity and satisfaction in heart. So this is a great invitation. This is what's available in Jesus. Not only that you would just see your bankruptcy, not only that you would just see the reason to mourn for the sinful impact you've had on yourself and the world, not only to see your inability to achieve righteousness, but to have it, to have all of this, to have spiritual wealth, to have spiritual joy, to have spiritual strength, to have spiritual satisfaction, to have the ability to be merciful towards others and to be generous to others. This is the way of Jesus.